he never thought his life would take such a turn. Daniel Reed was a single father, doing his best to raise his 9-year-old daughter, Emily. After his wife passed away in a car accident 3 years ago, his world had crumbled. He went from being a confident man with plans to someone who woke up every day just trying to make it through. His life revolved around Emily, his sunshine, his reason to keep breathing. But life, as usual, wasn't making it easy. Bills piled up. His old car broke down, and the small garage business he once ran had been swallowed by debt. He applied for jobs everywhere, supermarkets, warehouses, delivery services, but the rejection emails came faster than the bills. One day, after another long morning of disappointment, he saw a job listing that made him pause. Personal driver wanted for private estate. Confidential employer. Must be discreet, punctual, and trustworthy. It didn't say who the employer was, but the location was one of the most luxurious neighborhoods in the city, the kind where every house looked like a museum. Daniel hesitated. He didn't have experience as a personal driver, but he'd driven trucks, taxis, and even limousines in his younger days. And more than that, he needed this job. When he arrived at the address for the interview, he couldn't believe his eyes. The iron gates opened slowly to reveal a massive estate surrounded by fountains, trimmed hedges, and marble statues. A man in a suit led him inside, where he met the employer, Mr. Alexander Gray. One of the city's most powerful and reclusive billionaires. Gray was in his late 60s, dressed impeccably, his eyes sharp and unreadable. He looked at Daniel for a long time before speaking. "You a single father, correct?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, sir." "My daughter's my world." "Good," said Gray. "You'll understand loyalty, then." The interview was brief. No fancy questions, no paperwork right away. Just a warning. "This job," Gray said, "requires complete discretion. You'll see and hear things you're not to repeat. If you can handle that, you start tomorrow." Daniel accepted immediately. He didn't care who he was driving for or what secrets might be behind those gates. He just wanted a steady paycheck to take care of Emily. The next morning, he arrived at the mansion at 6 a.m. sharp. His uniform was laid out for him: black suit, tie, polished shoes. The car was a black Rolls-Royce, cleaner than anything he'd ever seen. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a work of art. At first, the job was simple: drive Mr. Gray to meetings, pick up guests, run errands. Gray rarely spoke, preferring to sit in silence with his phone or stare out the window. But over time, Daniel started to notice things. Every Friday, Gray asked to be driven to a small park on the other side of town. Not a fancy one. Just an ordinary public park where children played and old couples fed pigeons. Gray would sit on a bench for exactly 30 minutes, watching quietly before asking Daniel to take him back. One day, curiosity got the better of Daniel. "Sir," he asked carefully, "if you don't mind me asking, why this park?" Gray didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed fixed on the playground. "My son used to play here," he finally said, "before I became who I am now." Daniel didn't ask more. But from that day, something shifted. Gray began to talk, not much, but enough. He spoke about how money had built walls around him, how success had cost him his family, how the people closest to him had drifted away. And in those conversations, Daniel saw a side of the billionaire no one else probably ever did. Not the tycoon, not the mogul, but the man who had lost everything that truly mattered. Over the next few weeks, Gray began asking questions about Daniel's life. When he learned about Emily, his eyes softened. "You're raising her alone?" He asked. "Yes, sir. She's the reason I get up every day." Gray nodded. "Good man. Never forget that." A few days later, Gray surprised him. "Bring her," he said one morning. "Bring your daughter to the mansion this weekend." Daniel hesitated. "Are you sure, sir?" Gray simply replied, "Every child deserves to see where their father works." So on Saturday, Daniel dressed Emily in her best clothes and brought her to the estate. Her eyes went wide at the sight of the fountains and gardens. Gray was waiting for them by the entrance, and to Daniel's surprise, he smiled a genuine, warm smile. He gave Emily a tour of the gardens, showed her the koi pond, even let her feed the fish. That day, Daniel saw something no one else probably had in years: Alexander Gray laughing. From then on, weekends became special. Whenever Gray wasn't working, he'd invite Daniel and Emily to have lunch together. He'd tell stories from his youth, share old photographs, and sometimes just sit quietly while Emily played piano in the grand hall. Daniel started to realize that the billionaire had taken a liking to his daughter, maybe even seeing her as the granddaughter he never had. And in return, Emily adored Mr. Gray, as she called him. Months passed, and what began as a simple job became something more, almost like family. Gray even arranged for Emily's school tuition to be covered, saying it was a performance bonus. Daniel tried to refuse, but Gray wouldn't hear of it. "You've given me something money couldn't buy," he said. "Let me do this." But not everything was peaceful. Behind the scenes, the billionaire's health was failing. Daniel noticed it first, the way Gray would wince when walking. How he coughed more often, how his energy faded day by day. One night, after a long drive home from a business dinner, Gray asked Daniel to pull over by the park again. It was dark, the lamps flickering faintly. "Daniel," he said quietly, "if something happens to me, promise me you'll keep bringing her here. Keep her laughing. Don't let her grow up thinking the world is cold." Daniel's chest tightened. "Don't talk like that, sir." Gray smiled weakly. "We both know I don't have much time left." That night stayed etched in Daniel's memory. A few weeks later, Gray collapsed in his study. The doctors came, the ambulances followed, but it was too late. The man who had everything: power, wealth, influence, passed away quietly, with only Daniel and Emily at his side. The next day, Daniel expected his employment to end. After all, the mansion would go to lawyers, relatives, maybe some foundation. But when the will was read, the room fell silent. Gray had left something incredible behind, to everyone's shock. He left a letter specifically addressed to Daniel and Emily. Inside was a note written in shaky handwriting, greater than to Daniel, the man who reminded me what loyalty and fatherhood mean. "You drove more than my car. You drove me back to life, to Emily. Thank you for bringing light into a house long dark. I leave you both a cottage on the east side of the estate. It's not much compared to what I own, but it's a piece of peace, something I hope you'll fill with laughter." Daniel couldn't believe it. The small guest house, larger than anything he could ever afford, was now theirs. Along with it came a trust fund for Emily's education and a lifetime membership to the private library Gray had built on the property. The other heirs grumbled, but the will was ironclad. It was the billionaire's final wish. In the years that followed, Daniel continued driving, not for work, but for joy. Every Sunday, he and Emily would visit the park, sit on the same bench, and feed the pigeons, just like Mr. Gray used to. Sometimes, Daniel would tell Emily stories about him, how he started poor, how he built an empire, how loneliness had slowly crept in, despite all the luxury. And every time Emily laughed, Daniel knew Gray would have smiled. He never forgot the lessons the billionaire taught him. That success means nothing without kindness. That time is more valuable than money, and that sometimes the people you least expect can change your life forever. Years later, when Emily grew up and went to college, she studied business. Not because she wanted to be rich, but because she wanted to build something that mattered. Just like the man who believed in her father. When no one else did, Daniel often sat on the porch of their cottage, watching the sunset over the estate. He'd think back to that first day, the nervous interview, the quiet car rides, the moments that slowly turned strangers into family. He realized then that life had a strange way of giving second chances. He took a job nobody wanted, a driver's job for a man everyone feared or envied, and found something priceless. Not wealth, not status, but connection. He remembered Gray's words one final time. "You drove me back to life." And maybe, Daniel thought, that was what they both did for each other. Two men from two different worlds, bound by loss, loyalty, and love, finding peace in places they never expected. In the end, Daniel didn't just live the best days of his life driving a billionaire. He lived them discovering what truly mattered, not in the mansion, not in the cars, but in the moments that made them human. Sometimes, the road you least want to take turns out to be the one that leads you home.